Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, August 13th, 2021, and today I'm going to be talking about Joe Biden and Gavin Newsom in the state of California, with the Democratic Party seeming to increase their focus on this state that normally wouldn't be a battleground state at all. The state of California, which is largely stereotyped as one of the most liberal parts of the country, and while it may be right in terms of Democratic versus Republican vote share, it might not necessarily be as far to the left as you might think. And that could actually sort of explain why there is a large portion of the Democratic population that is open to recalling Gavin Newsom as governor of the state of California, and while Democrats are now focusing heavily on this state. If you take a look at the 2020 presidential electoral history, in no world would you ever expect California to be competitive for the GOP. And in a sense, they aren't really in a competitive nature. The recall election works in two ways. The ballot that you vote on September 14th will allow you to answer two questions. The first being, do you want to recall Gavin Newsom as governor? The second question being, who do you want to replace Gavin Newsom as governor? And because it is a two-question process with over 45 candidates on that second question, it allows the yeses to be up there simply by Democrats agreeing, all of the Republicans on that side, and a number of independents wanting Gavin Newsom out, but they don't necessarily agree on who they want to replace him. In fact, it could end up at a point where the majority might say, kick out Gavin Newsom, but that eventual winner, typically speaking, probably will be a Republican, considering not many notable Democrats have announced that they are running and can't announce. The deadline has already passed. That would allow a Republican to potentially win the governorship in the state of California with maybe 15 to 20% of the vote. So looking at California, because it is such a Democratic state, you wouldn't really expect that, except for right now. And the fact that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris are considering flying out to California really indicates that Democrats are in a bit of trouble in the state of California. You otherwise would never see them visit this state outside of a primary or potentially some type of very competitive House of Representatives election. Typically speaking, California doesn't even nominate Republicans when it comes down to the eventual ballot. And also, a point of interest that Kamala Harris, when elected in 2016 as the senator from California, ran against another Democrat. It ended up with two Democrats on the ballot, not a single Republican to vote for in that case. So, what do we need to talk about beyond just the surface level? Joe Biden might visit the state of California. Well, it's quite interesting to see. Joe Biden actually just sent out a statement urging California residents to vote no on this recall election. This is the first time that Joe Biden has actually sent out a major type of statement. He had said previously that, of course, he opposes the recall effort, but never really went too in depth. But now he's saying that Gavin Newsom is leading California through unprecedented crises. He's a key partner in fighting the pandemic, delivering economic relief to working families, and helping us build our economy back better than ever. Build back better. Joe Biden is using a lot of the rhetoric that he uses for swing state Democrats, that he's using currently for Terry McAuliffe in the state of Virginia. And Virginia is by no means California in terms of how Democratic it is. So looking at what Joe Biden is trying to do here, he's clearly trying to draw parallels between himself and Gavin Newsom. And this is fascinating to see, because Joe Biden really did not need to speak on this race maybe 2 months ago when the numbers didn't look super unfavorable for Gavin Newsom. But as this recall election creeps up and up and up, there becomes a larger opportunity for Republicans to swoop in and win this race because of the lack of Democratic enthusiasm and the lack of Democrats focusing on this race on the national standpoint, including Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I think that once this statement was made, many Republicans probably cringed at seeing it, because this statement is enough for some voters, for many voters in California, to vote no on recall. Even though Joe Biden had opposed it in the past, such a statement could be their determining factor. In addition, there are discussions about whether or not Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can fly out to California to take an active role in the campaign's home stretch, which could include in-person appearances and social media support. So now it goes beyond just a statement, beyond just answering a question by the media. Now they could go to Twitter, which they already have with this initial statement, but continuously. They could go to Instagram, Snapchat, other forms of social media that are common amongst younger, potentially more Democratic voters that otherwise wouldn't be too excited to vote in this race, might not even know about it, right? Many people don't know about recall elections occurring. So what's happening here is that the Democratic Party is going to have Biden and Harris either do in-person appearances or social media support. And the only real reason I can imagine as to why they aren't fully going forth with this in-person appearances is because California is still one of the strictest states during the pandemic. They are taking the Delta variant seriously. There are a number of places with reinstated mask mandates, reinstated social distancing mandates. Democrats might be inclined to require vaccinations in order for people to attend the rallies with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, or maybe require a negative COVID test, whatever it might be. There are a couple of more hoops that otherwise wouldn't necessarily been worried about had there not been a Delta variant or some other types of variants that could be ravaging across the nation as we speak. So, all in all, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris seem to be taking a pretty big role in what's happening in the state of California. And it shows here that the California electorate approves of Joe Biden by a 22-point margin. Quite fascinating to see. And while Kamala Harris's numbers aren't as favorable, she's a native Californian. She served as a senator from California when she ran for president of the United States. She became a very notable name in a very short period of time. I mean, think about the rise of Kamala Harris. Over 10 years ago, she was a nobody. 10 years ago, she was the attorney general of the state of California. She defeated a Republican to be in her position, and it was actually a pretty close race. Then in 2014, she won re-election, earning the endorsements of many notable Democrats and some notable Republicans. You want to know the most notable one? Donald Trump donated money to Kamala Harris as attorney general in support of her re-election bid. Then in 2016, she ran for United States Senate and won her first ever term. Did not even get to serve a full term before she became the vice president of the United States of America. Practically in less than a decade, Kamala Harris went from a statewide politician in California, which, yes, I understand, is the most populous state in this country, but went from a position of being a statewide attorney general, not even the governor, all the way to the vice presidency. And it's quite interesting to see, because as she was running for Senate in 2016, she became a shining star, and she's a very good campaigner in her home state. She might not necessarily be able to convince a large slew of voters across the states, across swing states in particular, but maybe in California, she holds that home state attitude, that home state sort of sentiment that will definitely benefit Gavin Newsom if she is out there actively campaigning for him. Because in 2003, there wasn't a Democratic governor, the Democratic president. There was a Democratic governor, Gray Davis, who lost his recall election, but not necessarily by the largest amount. And you can sort of understand exactly how this recall election moves forward. You can see that in the first question, do you vote yes to recall or no to recall? 55% of voters said yes, they want to recall this governor. Then in the second question, people asked, who would you want to replace the governor if they are recalled? The Democrat received 32% of the vote. Arnold Schwarzenegger received 49% of the vote. He was a celebrity. California has a long history of electing celebrities, and since they were ousting a Democrat, you can expect California to elect a Republican. But California in 2003 was much more of a swing state than it is now. And I know that's quite fascinating, quite weird to think about, but looking at California in the 2004 presidential election, you will see that John Kerry only won California by single digits. I kid you not. Won California by single digits. Joe Biden stands here today winning by over 29 points in the most previous election. So what is happening in California? It has taken certainly a much more leftward shift, and that should definitely benefit Gavin Newsom, especially if Joe Biden is out there. I'm also showing you the margin of victory for Joe Biden to bring up another point, that Joe Biden does better and did better than Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom won his race in 2018 by 23.8%. We can round up to 24%, which puts around a 5-point difference between the two. 5 points truly could make all the difference. Right now, when the average shows that yes, remove puts that ahead in the overall average by 2 points. 2 points. 5% certainly can make or break an election. And while I don't doubt that there are plenty of Democrats that have said that they do not particularly like Gavin Newsom, some of them might like Joe Biden more than they dislike Gavin Newsom, and may be inclined to keep Gavin Newsom as the governor of California simply because Joe Biden said so. And I know you won't really see that as a direct thing, or maybe you will, but the influence of the president in one of the most solid incumbent type states, in this case for the Democrats. If it was Donald Trump, I would have said maybe comparable to North or South Dakota, right? So Joe Biden in California holds a lot of political weight, and he certainly could change the tide in this race if he chooses to visit the state. Social media outreach will be great for Democrats, but actually having him there in person makes the voters realize this sense of urgency. All of the local news media companies are going to flock to the event. They are going to cover it. They are going to send out statements. If Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were sending out social media adverts, I'm sure that would get on YouTube, that would get on a number of things, and it would be the same thing that you see for Elizabeth Warren and other Democrats and Alex Padilla, whoever it might be, across the state of California. But Joe Biden and Kamala Harris visiting in person will flock large crowds, lots of media attention, and it will be the main story for the next month. That's just enough time before the September 14th election day for the recall election, because we likely should know whether or not this recall effort is going to move forward on September 14th or September 15th, given that California is the largest state in the union. But California, like I said, doesn't have the strongest history for these recalls. California having only one gubernatorial recall election in history before this one, in which the incumbent was defeated. But I know what you might be thinking. Has there ever been a recall election in which a governor has actually survived? And there's only been 3 governor recall elections in history, mostly because most states do not allow recall elections. But yes, there has been. 2012, Wisconsin had a recall election for Scott Walker and the lieutenant governor, and 4 state Senate races. Now, while the result of the governor election was a Scott Walker victory, this was actually a pretty large result for the Republican Party. This was actually a pretty good one, at least. There was 57.8% turnout. That's actually pretty high. In 2010, when Scott Walker was elected, the turnout was actually lower. And guess when this recall election actually occurred? It occurred in June of 2012. Not in November, not in September or October, but in the middle of the blistering heat summer, in which that's when the gubernatorial recall election occurred. And the turnout actually increased by 8 points because of the nationalized presence of the recall. That helped, I would say, Scott Walker win his re-election bid. He won by over nearly 6 points in this race. I mean, it was a recall election in which voters had said, we want another election to kick him out. And guess what? He won by a larger margin than he won by in 2010. Interesting to see. So yes, it is entirely possible to survive a recall election. And that is exactly what could happen for Gavin Newsom if Joe Biden is to visit the state, because he offers a number of advantages, with the margin being much higher than his. In addition, the recall election is only ahead by 2 points, and considering that many Democrats don't exactly expect to vote in this election, don't exactly expect to be super likely to vote, if Joe Biden can inspire them to get out there, or just to fill out the mail-in ballot, because every single California resident was mailed a ballot for this race. If he can just inspire them, just have them go find that ballot, fill it out, and put it in the mail, that would increase the Democratic Party vote share, because many Republicans already expect to vote in this race. It says of those who are likely to vote, 73% of Republicans are 100% certain to vote. 11% of Republicans are likely to vote. 4% are 50-50, and 8% are either unlikely or certainly not going to vote in this race. For Democrats, 16% of them say they're certainly not voting in this race. An additional 7% say they are unlikely to vote. 13% say they are 50-50. Just 23% say they are likely to vote, and just 39% say they are certain to vote. Looking at the 2020 presidential election results, Donald Trump received 6 million votes in 2020. Gavin Newsom only received 7 million votes. That means if Republicans come out in full force with 80 to 90% of their electorate, that number could be 5 million against the recall. If Democrats only come out with around 50%, sure, it might be narrowly enough, but that's assuming they get the 50%. This is way too close to be comfortable. If Democrats and Republicans were matching turnout, this wouldn't even be a competitive election at all, which is why Joe Biden needs to focus in on this state, and why Democrats need to take it a lot more seriously than they are. Because while they may have occasional ads with Elizabeth Warren and Alex Padilla and other statewide politicians and more local politicians for Gavin Newsom, it is very clear that something is not working. California should not be in this position where it is even competitive in this recall effort. The recall effort, which is being labeled as the Republican recall, should have much more opposition simply because of the Democratic Party messaging. Or the option is that it just simply isn't working, that voters here aren't resonating well with it because they don't see politicians that they know and love. Alex Padilla, who was nominated by Gavin Newsom to replace Kamala Harris in the United States Senate. People don't know him. He may be a former statewide official, but you don't exactly know his name as well as you know Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Then you have Elizabeth Warren going up across the state in terms of ad spending, in terms of TV ads, social media ads. But what does she add? She's a professor, a former professor, senator from Massachusetts. I mean, you are talking about what is stereotyped as the more elite or more elitist and more privileged portion of the country, right? And you are going to say that it really doesn't make sense for her to be down in California. She may be a notable name, but she's not necessarily a name that California natives are going to say she understands where we're coming from with this recall election. She understands what it's like in the state of California, at least for this exact recall election. And if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris especially was to visit the state, you would have the home state advantage of Kamala Harris visiting, and also the fact that Joe Biden is widely popular than Gavin Newsom. So, all in all, what are the main takeaways here? Well, first things first, that Biden and Harris even considering to visit this state at all shows that Democrats are worried because they need to be. This shows that they are starting to see the tides turn against them, and that should be worrying Democrats up across the nation. And Biden is the most approved of person in California. He holds a lot of weight. Gavin Newsom can't seem to bring himself back up, so he needs some external help. In this case, that is Joe Biden and including Kamala Harris. But if Joe Biden chooses not to go, Gavin Newsom will have to work 10 times harder. This race can be won alone without Joe Biden's presence, but can be more easily won. To be honest, if Joe Biden visits the state and actively campaigns for him in the final stretch, I don't imagine that Gavin Newsom will be recalled. If he is, it'll be another major blow to the Democratic Party and a major political upset if that occurs. But if Joe Biden decides not to visit, I wouldn't exactly be as shocked if Gavin Newsom was to be recalled. So we will see what happens. This election actually is set to occur, what is today, the 13th, in just a month and a day. So we will be seeing the results pour in from California. Millions upon millions of votes will be here for us to analyze and understand the direction of the race. It might be called on election night. It might take till the day after because California is a very large state and they take a little bit of time to count all of their ballots. And usually it's called much earlier because it's a safe Democratic state. But that simply is not the case in this recall election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.